I adjusted the strap of my maternity dress, my reflection a portrait of impending motherhood. In the living room, Kyle scrolled through real estate listings, his brow furrowed. "You'll be there, right? For the entire thing?" I asked, a flicker of anxiety in my voice. Kyle didn't look up. "Of course, Sloane, I'll just be on my phone handling the Patterson closing. It's a huge commission." The doorbell chimed and Diana swept in, a vision of curated elegance. "Darling, the big day." She kissed my cheek, her eyes critically scanning my swollen form. "Remember to breathe through the pain, we must be graceful." She turned her radiant smile to Kyle. "And you, my handsome son-in-law, ready for the big show?" Kyle finally looked up, grinning. "With you here, Diana, how could I not be?" I watched them, a familiar, unplaceable knot tightening in my stomach. They were the picture of a perfect, supportive family. I told myself it was just pre-labor jitters. The hospital room was a sterile, fluorescent blur. Contractions racked my body, each wave a fresh tide of agony. Kyle stood by the window, thumb jabbing at his phone. "I have to take this, it's the Pattersons," he muttered, already moving towards the door. Diana immediately took his place, clutching my hand, her grip firm to the point of pain. "Men," she sighed, dabbing my forehead with a cold cloth. "They don't understand the sacred pain of creation. This is our battlefield, darling, just us women." Hours bled together. A kind-faced nurse named Gail checked her dilation. 6 centimeters. "You're doing great, honey. Is your husband getting some air?" Through gritted teeth, I asked for my lip balm from my overnight bag in the car. "Kyle has the keys," I panted. Nurse Gail nodded. "I'll find him. You just focus on that beautiful baby." She left. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the fire in my spine, unaware that the first thread of my reality was about to be pulled. When Nurse Gail returned, the air around her had changed. She avoided my gaze, her smile strained as she placed the overnight bag on the bedside table. "Here you go, sweetie." She lingered, her eyes filled with a profound, unsettling pity. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice weak. Gail just patted her hand. "You just focus on you and that baby, you're so strong." She left quickly. Later, after an emergency C-section, I lay in the post-op room, my son, Leo, swaddled against my chest. The world was soft and hazy with painkillers. Kyle and Diana fussed over the baby, their voices a distant hum. As I was moved to my private room, a nurse handed me a plastic bag with my personal effects. Inside was the maternity dress she'd arrived in. It was crumpled, and a dark, sticky stain marred the fabric. Puzzled, I lifted it to my face, and then I smelled it. My mother's signature jasmine perfume, the sharp, musky scent of Kyle's cologne, and beneath it all, the unmistakable metallic scent of sex. The world did not crack, it vaporized. The sounds of the hospital faded into a high-pitched whine. My eyes locked onto a single, long, platinum blonde hair stuck to the stained fabric, Diana's hair. The timeline assembled itself with brutal, cinematic clarity. My agonizing contractions, Kyle's absence, Diana's disappearance, the nurse's pity. They had done this in my car in the hospital parking lot, while my body was being torn open to bring our child into the world. A primal scream built in my throat, a raw, shredding thing, but I choked it down. I looked at Leo's perfect sleeping face, his tiny mouth pursed in a dream. A coldness sharper than any surgical blade settled deep within my soul. This was not a wound to be sobbed over. This was a declaration of war. They thought I was weak, they thought I was blind. They had no idea that in that moment the woman they betrayed had died, and something far more dangerous had been born in her place. I became a master of performance. I played the role of the grateful, overwhelmed new mother to perfection. When Diana visited, criticizing my breastfeeding technique or the state of the house, I just nodded, my eyes wide and docile. "You're right, Mom, thank you for helping me." When Kyle came home late, smelling of whiskey and a faint trace of jasmine, I would pretend to be asleep. I banked my fury, letting it crystallize into a diamond-hard resolve. I began keeping a secret journal, not of feelings but of evidence. July 14th, Kyle working late, Diana at a spa. Both returned within 10 minutes of each other. His collar was misbuttoned. I started siphoning small, untraceable amounts of money from our joint account into a new private one. I called it the Freedom Fund. I would look at Leo, his innocent eyes mirroring my own, and whisper promises to him. "They will never hurt you. They will never touch us again. I will burn their world to the ground to keep you safe." The gaslighting was a subtle, insidious poison. "You're just tired, Sloane," Kyle would say when I asked about a charge on our credit card for a romantic restaurant I'd never been to. "That was a business dinner. You really need to get a handle on your paranoia." Diana was more cutting. "Darling, motherhood is clearly taking a toll. You're imagining things. You always were a sensitive child." They grew bolder. I would walk into a room and they would fall silent, sharing a look that was both intimate and conspiratorial. Once I found them on the patio, Diana's hand resting on Kyle's arm, their heads closed together. They sprang apart, but the electricity between them was palpable. "We were just discussing your future," Diana said smoothly. "Kyle and I agree you should be a stay-at-home mom. Your little design hobby is too stressful." I just smiled, a hollow, placid thing. "That sounds wonderful, Mom." Inside, the cold strategist was cataloguing it all. Every lie, every touch, every condescending word. They were building their own gallows, and she was patiently weaving the rope. A year after Leek's birth, I initiated phase 1. I reached out to an old university friend, Ben, who now ran a discreet private investigation firm. I met him in a quiet park, Leek playing on a blanket between us. "I need everything," I said, my voice steady. "Financials, communications, physical evidence. They're having an affair. I need proof that will hold up in the most vicious court battle imaginable." Ben listened, his expression grim. "Sloan, are you sure? This is heavy." I handed him a list of dates, times, and Kyle's license plate number. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Next, I went shopping. A tiny voice-activated recorder that I slipped into the pocket behind the sun visor in Kyle's car. A pair of elegant, functional nanny cams, one for the living room, one for the bedroom hallway. I paid in cash from my Freedom Fund. That night, as Kyle scrolled through his phone oblivious, I watched the live feed on my tablet. I saw him smile at a text, a smile he never gave me anymore. I took a screenshot. It was the first piece of my arsenal. I stopped eating my pain. I started feeding it to my resolve. I began waking up at 5 a.m. using online workout videos while Leo slept. The softness of motherhood melted away, replaced by lean, defined muscle. I started taking on high-profile freelance design projects under the pseudonym Phoenix Creative. The money was good, and the alias was a private joke that fueled me. I bought clothes that hinted at the new strength beneath, not for Kyle's attention, but for my own armor. The change was unnerving to my captors. "You're looking thin," Diana remarked one afternoon, her eyes narrowed. "Are you eating enough?" Kyle seemed almost irritated by my newfound confidence. "You're different," he accused one night. I just smiled my placid, empty smile. "I'm just a mom, Kyle. This is what happy looks like." I was no longer the prey hiding in the grass. I was the hunter, patiently circling, my movements silent and deliberate. The game was shifting, and they were too arrogant to feel the ground crumbling beneath their feet. The invitation arrived on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. The Women in Business Excellence Gala, honoring the city's top female entrepreneurs. Diana's interior design firm was among the honorees. It was the crowning moment of her career, the ultimate validation she craved. I saw the flyer on the kitchen counter, and my entire body hummed with a sudden, terrifying clarity. This was the stage, public, irrefutable, and perfectly suited to Diana's vanity. That evening I feigned excitement. "Mom. This is incredible, you must be so proud," Diana preened. "It's a recognition of a lifetime of impeccable taste, darling." I turned to Kyle. "We have to go, we have to support her." Kyle looked uncomfortable. "It's black tie, and it's the same night as my golf tournament dinner." I laid a hand on his arm, my touch cold. "Kyle, she's family, we need to be there as a united front." I saw the conflict in his eyes, his loyalty to Diana warring with his fear of a public scene. He finally nodded. "You're right, of course we'll go." My smile was genuine for the first time in a year. The trap was set. I volunteered to help with the gala's multimedia presentation. "I am a graphic designer, Mom. Let me make you a slideshow that's as stunning as you are." Diana, flushed with narcissistic delight, agreed. "What a lovely idea, Sloan, finally putting your little skills to good use." I spent days crafting a beautiful, generic slideshow celebrating Diana's career. It was the perfect Trojan horse. Meanwhile, Ben delivered his final report. It was a treasure trove of damning evidence. Hotel receipts, financial records showing Kyle funneling money to Diana, and crystal-clear audio recordings. The most devastating was from the day of Leo's birth. Diana's voice, breathy and mocking. "She's so ordinary, pushing out a baby like a common animal. You need a goddess, Kyle, you need me." I listened to it on a loop, letting the words carve out any last remnants of love or pity. I edited my revenge slides with surgical precision. I gained access to the gala's AV system through a contact Ben provided. The switch was ready. All she needed was the spotlight. The night of the gala, I took my time getting ready. I slipped into a floor-length crimson gown, a color of power and warning. I styled my hair, applied my makeup, and looked at my reflection. The exhausted, broken woman from the hospital was gone. In her place was a queen, ready for a coronation of ash. Kyle watched me, a strange look in his eyes, part confusion, part desire. You look expensive, he said, the words clumsy. Diana was a vision in icy silver, a calculated contrast. Red Sloane, such a bold choice, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. The car ride was silent. The ballroom was a glittering cavern of crystal and champagne. Diana was swept away by admirers. Kyle immediately found the bar. I moved through the crowd, a serene smile on my face, accepting congratulations on my mother's behalf. Inside, I was a countdown timer. I found a quiet corner, opened the secure app on my phone connected to the AV system, and loaded the file named Legacy. My thumb hovered over the screen. I took a deep breath. It was time. Diana took the stage to a wave of applause. The lights dimmed and my benign slideshow began, images of Diana's designs, her awards. Diana's voice was smooth and practiced as she accepted her award. Thank you. This honor isn't just for me. It's for every woman who refuses to be ordinary. My blood ran cold at the word, ordinary. I saw Kyle near the stage, looking up at Diana with naked admiration. This was the moment. As Diana finished her speech, poised for a final photo op, I tapped my screen. The elegant image of a living room design flickered and died. The screen went black for a heart-stopping second. A murmur ran through the crowd. Then a new image bloomed on the massive screen, bright and damning for all to see. It was a selfie taken in a car, Kyle shirtless, grinning, and beside him Diana, her head on his shoulder, her lips pressed to his cheek. The timestamp in the corner was clear, the date and time of Leah's birth. The caption beneath in stark white letters read, "Congratulations, Grandma." The applause died instantly, replaced by a collective, horrified gasp. Diana, confused by the silence, turned to look at the screen. Her face, once a mask of triumph, slackened with disbelief, then contorted in sheer terror. A chorus of whispers erupted. Is that her son-in-law? The day her grandchild was born? Kyle at the bar froze, his glass halfway to his lips. His face drained of all color. On stage, Diana fumbled for the clicker, jamming the button, but the image didn't change. I had locked the system. Then the audio began. It was their voices, amplified and echoing in the dead silence of the ballroom. Diana's voice, "She'll never be enough for you, not like I am, she's so weak." Kyle's voice, "Watching you give birth was a turn-off, this you are real." The whispers turned to shouts of disgust. People began pointing, their faces masks of revulsion. Diana stood paralyzed, a statue of shame under the blinding lights. Her perfect world was detonating in high definition, and there was nowhere to hide. I began to walk. I moved through the parted crowd, a streak of crimson in a sea of black and white. My heels clicked on the marble floor, a steady metronomic sound against the chaos. I ascended the stage steps, my posture regal. Diana stared at me, eyes wide with a dawning, horrific understanding. This was Sloane. This was her doing. I gently pried the microphone from my mother's frozen, limp hand. I turned to face the audience, my voice calm and clear, amplified across the room. You taught me that a mother and daughter share everything, Diana. I paused, letting the silence weigh heavy. I guess you were right, you shared my husband. I turned my icy gaze to Kyle, who was trying to shrink into the crowd. And you, Kyle, the man who vowed to cherish me, you chose to defile that vow with the one woman who was supposed to protect me. I looked back at the crowd. This is not a scandal, this is a cancer, and tonight I am cutting it out. I tapped her phone again. The screen changed, showing scanned images of bank statements. You wondered about your money, Kyle. My voice was like shattering glass. The business investments, the market losses. Red arrows highlighted transfers from their joint account to an account under Diana's name. The amounts were staggering. A graphic showed the plummeting balance of their shared life. Gasps turned into angry mutters. Then came the final slide. It was a high-resolution artistic photograph of the stained maternity dress, laid out like a forensic exhibit. The texture of the fabric, the dark stain, the single, accusing blonde hair, it was all visible. The text overlay was simple and devastating. You betrayed me in this dress, now I clothe myself in vengeance. The room was in an uproar. Camera phones were flashing, capturing Diana's utter humiliation and Kyle's panic. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening thud. I didn't look at my mother again. I walked off the stage, through the crowd that now looked at me with a mixture of shock and awe, and out into the cool night air. I did not look back. The fallout was swift and merciless. The video of the gala went viral overnight. Diana's business, built on a reputation of elegance and trust, evaporated. Her clients, disgusted, terminated their contracts. The local society pages, which had once adored her, now ran headlines like "Gala of Gall" and "The Mother of All Betrayals." Her phone rang incessantly, first with faux concerned friends hungry for gossip, then with lawyers, and finally with silence. She became a prisoner in her own impeccably decorated home, the walls that once showcased her taste now feeling like a gilded cage. The woman who lived for admiration was now universally reviled. The final blow came when the board of the Women's Business League issued a formal statement rescinding her award and membership, citing gross moral turpitude. Her legacy was not one of excellence but of infamy. She had wanted to be a goddess, she became a cautionary tale. Kyle's ruin was just as comprehensive. The partners at his real estate firm called him at dawn. He was fired not just for the scandal but for the embezzlement I had exposed. The Patterson closing and other major deals fell through. No one wanted to be associated with him. The prenuptial agreement my father had insisted upon, which Kyle had once mocked, now became his prison. The morality clause left him with nothing. No house, no assets, no claim to Sloane's freelance earnings. He was served with divorce papers at his cheap motel room, along with a restraining order barring him from contacting me or Leo. His reputation was a smoking crater. He tried to call Diana, but her number was disconnected. He was utterly alone, a pariah stripped of his money, his family, and his fragile ego. The man who had sought validation in the worst way possible was now defined by the world's unanimous contempt. I sat in the silence of her new home, a sleek, modern apartment I'd rented under my own name. The last of the boxes were unpacked. Leo slept soundly in his room, surrounded by toys and love, far from the toxicity of his former life. The silence was no longer heavy, it was peaceful. A notification popped up on my laptop. It was an email from a major design firm, having seen my viral story and seeking to hire Phoenix Creative for a flagship campaign. They praised my strength and unique creative vision. I smiled, a real, untethered smile that reached my eyes. I was no longer Sloane the victim, I was Sloane the survivor. The architect of my own life. I looked at a photo on my mantel, a picture of me and Leo taken just days ago. Our faces were bright, our smiles genuine. The shadows of the past were gone. I had walked through hellfire and emerged not with burns but tempered into something unbreakable. This was not an ending, it was my beginning. Months later, a padded envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single handwritten letter on expensive, monogrammed stationery. It was from Diana. The elegant script was shaky, the words desperate. Sloane, you have no idea what you've done. My life is over, I have nothing, I am your mother, you owe me compassion, you owe me a chance to explain. He seduced me, it was all Kyle, we are flesh and blood, how could you be so cruel? There was no apology. Only blame and self-pity. I felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, not even satisfaction. It was like reading about a stranger. I held the paper over the kitchen sink and lit a corner with a match. I watched the flames consume my mother's words, the embers curling into black ash before I washed them down the drain. Some bonds, once broken, could never be mended. Some echoes were meant to fade into silence. I felt a final, quiet click inside me, a door closing forever. A year after the gala, I was at a park with a now toddling Leo when I saw him. Kyle. He looked gaunt, his clothes worn. He was watching us from a distance, a haunting look of longing and regret on his face. My body went on high alert, my grip tightening on Leo's hand. I stood up, ready to confront him, to call the police, but he didn't approach. He just stood there, a ghost from a life I no longer lived. Then he did something I didn't expect. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a threat, it was an acknowledgement, a surrender. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the city crowd. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. He was no longer a monster, just a broken man, and that somehow felt more final than any confrontation. He was part of the past, and me and Leo were the future. I lifted Leo onto my hip, his happy babble washing away the last chill of the encounter. We were safe. My design firm, Phoenix Creative, was thriving. I had embraced the name, turning my story of destruction and rebirth into my brand's core strength. I gave a text talk about reclaiming personal power after profound betrayal, speaking not with bitterness but with a powerful, resonant calm that captivated the audience. I never mentioned names, but everyone knew. After the talk, a young woman approached me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm in a similar situation." I thought I was stuck. "You made me feel like I could be strong too." I took the woman's hand. "You are strong," I said, my voice firm. "You just haven't had to prove it to yourself yet." In that moment, I understood the true value of my victory. It wasn't just about my revenge. It was about my resurrection. My pain had become a roadmap for others. I was no longer just a woman who had been wronged. I was a symbol of the fierce, unyielding power that can be forged in the crucible of heartbreak. "Mama," Leo's voice was clear as a bell, his little arms wrapped around my neck as I read him a bedtime story. He was the absolute center of my universe, a happy, secure child who knew he was cherished. There were no whispers, no lies, no tension in his home. I made sure of that. I looked into his eyes, so like my own, and saw a future untainted by the past. I made him a promise every night, not with words but with my presence. The promise of stability, of honesty, of a love that was fierce and protective. I would break the cycle of manipulation and narcissism that had defined my own childhood. My love for him was the balm that healed my own scars. It was the one pure thing that had emerged from the wreckage, and I would spend the rest of my life ensuring it grew in the light. Thanksgiving arrived. I hosted it in my new apartment for a few close friends and Ben, the pie, who had become a trusted confidant. The table was loud, filled with laughter and easy conversation. There was an empty chair, a conscious choice. It was the space where Diana or Kyle would have sat, casting a pall over the festivities. No one mentioned them. They were non-entities. As I looked around the table, at the faces of people who valued me for my strength and character, not for what I could do for them, I felt a profound sense of peace. The family I had was not the one I was born into, but the one I had built. It was forged in trust and mutual respect. It was real. I caught Ben's eye across the table, and he gave me a warm, knowing smile. There was a quiet understanding between us, a shared knowledge of what I had overcome. The empty chair was not a symbol of loss, but of freedom. On the anniversary of the gala, I took a walk alone along the beach. The wind whipped my hair, and the crashing waves mirrored the turmoil I had once held inside, now settled into a powerful, deep calm. I thought not of the revenge, but of the journey. I had been reduced to nothing, a raw, bleeding nerve of betrayal, and from that nothing I had rebuilt myself piece by piece into a woman I respected. My legacy would not be one of vengeance, but of resilience. It would be the foundation I built for Leo. It would be the work I did through my firm. It would be the quiet confidence I carried every day. The world knew the story of my humiliation and my fiery payback, but only I knew the story of the quiet, steadfast courage it took to heal afterward. That was my true triumph. I stood on my balcony watching the city lights twinkle like a field of fallen stars. A sense of completeness settled over me. The chapters of pain, of plotting, of execution were closed. The story of I and Kyle, of I and Diana was over. A new story had begun, and I was its author. I heard Leo's soft breathing from the monitor inside, a sound that was my anchor and my joy. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I had chosen to become. I had loved, I had lost, I had been broken, and I had risen not just to seek justice but to find myself. The revenge was a closed door. The future was a wide-open sky, and I was finally unshakably whole. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, turned my back on the darkness, and walked inside to my sun, to my life, to my peace.